Namaste. Psychoanalysis and philosophy, idol therapy. Mental health problems are an inseparable part of human society. In ancient times as well, how did people deal with it? Was there a radically different way to understand and heal them? And how different was it from what it is today? Today we explore this with our psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So can we start with what is idol therapy?
Idol therapy is a form of psychotherapy aimed at healing and self-development, which uses ancient spiritual sciences, especially Indian sciences. And the centrality in this modality is use of idol, sciences around the idol, the rituals and the social processes around the idol in order to accomplish a particular goal. The goal of idol therapy can be to heal somebody or as a prophylactic to maintain good health so sickness does not come. And of course, we are talking of the psychological part and for self-development. Idol therapy is a very ancient science used for thousands of years in civilization, both in India and outside. Like shamanism, it is one of those sciences which we have lost. And now it is confined to a few secretive small groups or places. And in the rest of the world, it is seen largely either as a tradition or as a superstition, but it's not seen as a science per se. However, it is inconceivable that something so unscientific, if it was so, could have endured for thousands of years and caught admiration of millions of people across the world. So obviously, it was not a superstition, it was not a tradition, it was a full science. And this science is now not popularly available, almost lost, and it is time we took a relook at it. At the heart of it, this approach of therapy, if you can call it therapy, or you can also call it a spiritual approach, essentially is a biopsychosocial approach. On the bio front, it involves use of certain substances, certain herbs, certain Ayurvedic preparations. On the psycho part, it is a elaborate science into itself of how to create an idol, how to relate to the idol, how to manage the experiences which happen when you relate to the idol in the inner world. And for that, you require a trained person, a guru, to guide you through it. And then the socio aspect, because idol worship has both the aspects, individual and social. So many aspects of idol worships involve a social gathering, a social event. And therefore, it is a very comprehensive form of psychotherapy, which involves bio, psycho, socio, all three aspects in a great details. And this is an extremely powerful and subtle but occult form of psychotherapy. It is even more subtle than acupressure, acupuncture, Reiki, or pranic healing. Even more subtle than those kind of modalities of healing, because it definitely uses them, but goes far deeper into the occult aspect of nature, both outside of us and inside of us in the way our mind operates and responds to those occult phenomena.
So how do we understand can you explain to us the deeper aspects related to the idol therapy?
Uh, from a psychological standpoint, or even more specifically from a psychoanalytic standpoint, we are here looking at the idol becomes the omnipotent good object. The idol also becomes a place for confession and self-expression. It becomes a place for articulation of desire. It also becomes a place for relating to somebody. It becomes a place for internalizing something. It becomes an entity for expression of one's desire and getting support from one's desire. It powers our desire. It powers our capability to move towards our desire. It becomes a confession box. It also becomes a place for catharsis, that you can go and weep yourself out in front of the idol. It also becomes a customized place for resolution, where one particular idol does one particular job. Take for example, the idol of Lord Ganesha, the omnipotent good child, is looked at obstacle remover in the internal world and the external world. And he sits in the Muladhara, where the anger and fear are located. And the inner child is there not completely healthy. And therefore, the anger from that chakra goes on to oneself for self-destruction. So many of the obstacles are created from inside and many are created outside. And this particular form, when we relate to and we internalize with a background in our mind, a story about that form. So we have a form of a particular God who is powerful, and there is a life story of that God. And that creates a personality of the idol. And that personality we relate to, and those qualities we internalize, or that personality we internalize, or we believe is along with us, that gives power to our desire, that makes us fearless, that makes us feel supported. Then we have the whole energy element of the idol. That the idol essentially also is a crystal. So just as in crystal healing, you put energy and program into the crystal. When we say certain idols are very powerful, certain temples people go to visit, that is because the idols there have been loaded with lot of energy and programmed in a particular way. So just as we put energy into a crystal and program the crystal, the idol also is a crystal, but a very dense crystal. Because the kind of material which the idol is made of and the form it takes is such that if you want to really energize it, you require huge amount of energy. It is not as easy to energize that as it is to energize a small piece of a crystal. So energizing that and programming that requires quite an amount of skill and power. Once it is given, then that particular idol works as a crystal. And anybody who comes near or asks for certain things, if it resonates with the program, the idol works for that person. And therefore, we are told that for certain kind of desires, we go to particular temples. Because the idol there is programmed and energized for that particular purpose. So, this is the crystal aspect, the occult aspect of the idol. And therefore, we are told that in certain temples, children should not go, or old people should not go, or women should not go, or pregnant women should not go, or somebody sick should not go, because those idols were programmed in a particular way. That if these people go there, it will not be to their benefit. Or if you go to a place which is programmed in such a way that it will help somebody who has a problem of, let us say, confidence, but not somebody who has a problem of expressing emotion. So then one has to go to a particular idol which is programmed for that particular thing. So this is the crystal aspect of the idol, the energy healing and the programming aspect of the idol. And in recent times, in contemporary times, we can see and try to understand the consecration that Sadhguru has done of Dhyan Linga, which took so many years for him to consecrate and put energy and the programming that he wanted to put into it, all the powers that he wanted to put into it. So these things have been occurring all over India. Claims have always been there. And of course, it's a question of occult and therefore becomes a question of belief, not a question of science, given the present state of science. And another aspect is equally occult and equally difficult to believe, and that is the ability of the idol to not only have energy and programming, but a creative consciousness also become a part of itself, where a yogi who is advanced gives part of its power, gives part of his powers to that idol in a particular way. So this is like a transfer of consciousness, which is something far-fetched, and for you and me, it's by and large fiction at the given time. But this is what the science of idol tells us, that it is also a very good element or very good component of that whole ecosystem where transfer of consciousness happens. So all these elements are the elements, the deeper aspect of idol worship. Not to mention what goes along with the idol worship or idol therapy rather, the guidance that the guru or the expert gives of how to make use of all these phenomena for one's well-being and self-development. Lastly, the rituals and the substances which are used at the social occasions and what one ought to do in other parts of life to back up one's proficiency or one's development in this particular path or approach, that also is very important. So all these aspects make together a comprehensive package, almost an ecosystem that goes into idol therapy, and there is a social aspect to it. Like you can have an idol which is programmed and energized, and maybe even consciousness transfer is done for one person or a few people and for a short period of time, or you can actually create a temple which lasts for hundreds of years and can benefit thousands of people. So there is this whole public health aspect of idol therapy. Ironically, we are talking something which is as blasphemous as it can get given the current mood of science.
Right. Sir, in psychoanalytically speaking, how does it work in the process term?
In process terms, what happens is a person is able to relate deeply to a personality. The personality is a concrete object in the external world and a mental object in the internal world. And this ability to relate repairs some of the attachment issues, because inability to attach safely is a core difficulty in many categories of pathology. Second important aspect is the support that one gets from that idol, which is supposed to be powerful, consecrated, and benevolent. So the support and the power that one gets. The third is the internalization of a good, reliable, stable object. The fourth is it as a confession box, almost as a therapy room, where one does not speak loudly, but one makes a confession of one's follies and one's desires. It is also uh, a tool whereby the form itself is important. And the way the form is chosen and the personality around it is created is for particular healing. And therefore, based upon which pathology we will have to select an idol with a particular personality. And lastly, uh, the intense emotional involvement with the personality not only helps us in catharsis, but overcomes our reluctance for emotional engagement, the fear of closeness that we have. And all these are important elements from a psychoanalytic point of view that operate in the inner world and take care of some of our deepest anxieties, our incapacities, and help us purify and open up ourselves.
So, sir, as per you, should psychoanalysis engage with idol therapy?
Answer is yes, and this answer is as blasphemous as it can get, because uh, the mainstream science and psychoanalysis included, by and large, look at this whole concept of idol worship, nothing more than at best a tradition and at worst a superstition. They don't see the science of idol worship, which has many aspects to it, a healing aspect, a developmental aspect, a social aspect, and an esoteric aspect, and a spiritual aspect. They see only it either as a, positively speaking, a tradition, negatively speaking, a superstition, but nothing of great value into it. So they don't engage. But if you ask me, I would say yes. Despite the brickbats that are going to come, I would still say psychoanalysis should engage with uh, idol therapy and look at the psychoanalytic processes which are happening there. And that will enrich the idol therapy itself and also get some understanding of how the mind operates, heals, and develops for psychoanalysis also. Especially this whole science of forms, of stories, of energy, of programming crystals, of consciousness transfer, and this kind of other parapsychological phenomena. So that will be a quite an enrichment for psychoanalysis also. I don't think they will think of this as enrichment. What I am calling enrichment, they will call it contamination and destruction. But in my view, it is so.
So, sir, is there a sequence that you would recommend to be followed in idol therapy?
Yes. Uh, Idol therapy is a very comprehensive and complicated science, and there are many sequences to be followed. Let us say one sequence is to move from the root chakra to the Sahasrara chakra. So for every chakra, there is a particular idol. And there is a story behind that idol, there is a personality. And there is a way of engaging with that idol. And there are separate rituals, separate food regimen, separate substances to be used, separate social phenomena to be involved in, and separate rituals to be practiced. So there is a complete package at every chakra. So there is a different idol, and corresponding to that idol, there is a unique package. And therefore, different idols have to be worshipped or have to be involved in idol therapy as you move from the root chakra to the Sahasrara chakra in the Indian psychotherapy worldview. From a psychoanalytic standpoint, if I was to translate the same thing, it would be when you are dealing with anger and fear and survival, you have a particular idol and particular regimen how to do the idol therapy. Once you are clear with this part, then you move to sexuality, sense pleasure and envy and jealousy, and you have a separate idol and a separate regimen. Then you move to the element of power, a separate idol and a separate regimen, and similarly you keep going up. So that is one way you go from bottom to the top. There is a second way. Some people start from top to bottom. So for them, the same sequence is reversed. So they believe that you must strengthen the higher parts before you open up the lower parts. So for them, they follow the top-down sequence, and therefore the sequence reverses for them. Some people start from the heart chakra, the heart center. So for them, the sequence is first the idol related to the heart center and its whole process, then the upper chakras, and lastly the lower chakras. So that way the sequence differs. Some people look at three psychological movements which are essential movements, and the three essential movements are the movement outwards into the world, the movement inwards into the pathological parts of ourselves, and the movement upwards into the area of freedom, insight, knowledge, and spiritual liberation. So these three movements also require three different idols or three sets of idols if more than one idol is required, and three different processes. So if the movement towards the pathological insight is very high, a separate kind of regimen is given. If that has been taken care of, person is reasonably normal and he wants to do something in going outwards, a separate kind of regimen is given. So these three movements are taken into consideration. The movement into the outer world, the normal movement of becoming, the movement into the inner pathological spaces, and the movement of development inside into the world of insights, higher knowledge, and spiritual progress. So based upon how these three movements are and what needs to be corrected and when and how one has to develop, a separate regimen of idol therapy is taken up. Now, how it is taken up depends upon the specifics, depends upon uh, the person, his personality, his pathology, intensity, his objectives, and the way the teacher looks at him and teacher's own training. That is how the specifics of this emerge at an individual level.
Okay. So, sir, how do you relate separation and mourning here in idol therapy from a psychoanalytic point of view?
So in idol therapy, there are different types of idols. There are idols which are there forever. And there you get into the relationship with the idol, and the objectives of that idol are different. But there are certain programs in idol therapy where you create the idol, you remain with the idol, and then you let go of the idol. If you look at the coming home of Lord Ganesha, which is at present on in India, that for 15 days, people bring the statue of Lord Ganesha, do the worship, and then they give it into the river, right? What we call resurgence. So the whole idea was that first you create the idol, then you go through a certain process with the idol, and when the idol is with you and you are doing the process, certain lifestyle management also has to be done in terms of food, lifestyle, meditation, chanting, and all those kinds of things, including energy healing. So that part is done, and then the visarjan happens. Visarjan is to let go into the ocean or the river. It is like giving back to earth what you took from earth. And that is where the separation and mourning happens. That you had related to the idol for such a long time, and then you have to let go. So these practices essentially are to master and bring about this whole deep sense of separation and mourning. So you have festivals in India which, along with many other things, also address this issue. So any short-term thing that you see, which starts at a particular point, goes on for a few days and ends. So there you have all the psychological phenomena, the phenomena of birth or advent, right? And coming into existence of a person and relating to him, the strengthening of the relationship, getting gains from the relationship, and then separation and mourning. So it's a complete life cycle of a relationship. So time-bound uh, idols are created for this kind of purposes.
How is it ideally done? Should it be a solo therapy done under some expert guidance, or is it to be is it a complementing therapy? How should ideal therapy be followed?
Uh, Ideally, it should be done with expert guidance, because what is happening internally to you as you do the process is very deep. It is not within the capability of an ordinary individual to understand it. Unless one is deeply trained, you can't make sense of the science and you just remain at the surface of tradition. So you remain at the superficial level of tradition, you don't go into depths of the science behind it. So it ideally should be done under guidance, because it is too complicated a science and it's almost like a specialization. So just as in psychoanalysis, you specialize in Kleinian or Freudian psychoanalysis, you have to specialize in idol therapy. It's that kind of a complicated and deep and comprehensive thing. So ideally, it should be so done. In the process of it, when one is undergoing it, certain intervals, the teacher asks the person to really go alone and do on one's own the whole thing. So, in order to make the person independent and not develop a dependency on the teacher, this solo idol therapy process also is incorporated as a part of a larger process. If one is going somewhere for a solo meditation, then what to do there? There is a special different kind of approach for that. Let me say a tourist package, so to say. And uh, not only in terms of to do with the guru or teacher or alone, but there are certain elements to be done socially in collaboration with others. The others can mean society at large, or it can just be a large group of interested students or like-minded people. They are a group of seekers. So there is a solo form of idol therapy, uh, with teacher form of idol therapy, a social form of idol therapy. And all the things are used in particular combination, in particular sequences, based upon what objectives we have in mind. Uh, Often there is a tradition which is called uh, in Indian spiritual tradition, it's called the Kurma Guru,
Okay.
or that is a guru who looks at you only from a distance. And in such cases, and this has been my own particular experience also, uh, when I met one of the people, one of the persons who was enlightened and a very developed person,
Mhm.
uh, I was very young at that point, must be 20, 25 years back. And I was meeting him for the second time, and I did not know that for next 20, 25 years I won't meet him, but probably he sensed it. So what he did was he had a photograph of Sai Baba, he just rolled it out. He said something which I could not know. He said something in his own mind, recited something, put on some sandalwood paste and something of that sort, and asked me to take it, get it framed and keep it with me. So this was his way of giving me something by transferring it to that particular photograph or the idol. It's an idol on the paper, not really a stone idol, but an idol on the paper. So this is also a way in which many people give away something, some idol to somebody, and then that person goes solo. It has been my case that I did not go back to him. I feel like going now, but I have not met him for a long time. But the entire developmental process of mine for the last 20 years, I'm sure that would have contributed something to it. So this is also one way where you give something to somebody and let the person go and develop on one's own. And this thing, what you give him, aids in his development.
So these is the festivities that we follow. I mean, the tradition or the rituals that we follow is more of collective thing, right? And I'm sure there's no conscious efforts. It just happens. Like people who during Ganesh Chaturthi also, you bring the god home, you worship for so many days, and then you immerse the idol in the water. So if it is not, I'm sure it is not done with proper consciousness. Then also, if it can give us so much benefit, I'm sure if it is done with little conscious efforts, it would be of great help.
Yes, because once you become conscious, people who will become conscious of this kind of things will be those who are deeply interested in their own self and would have spent considerable amount of time inside of them.
Right.
So we are looking at really sincere people who are intelligent, and once they know the real depths of this phenomena, they can actually gain much more by using this phenomena, because this is like one of the behavioral therapies with deepest of depth psychology insights.
Right. Sir, is this idol therapy being used as a part of any psychoanalysis or basically psychoanalytic healing?
No, it's a blasphemy. They can't even think about it. And I'm
No?
sure if somebody tries to do, he will be thrown out of the International Psychoanalytic Society. It would be a crime worse than what Lacan committed. So
You
I'm
think
sure.
so? Even the Jungian would think so?
No, I think Jungian is the only exception where he was open to experimentation with everything. So the whole science of forms, the science of mythology, and its relevance for the human mind, Jung was open to these traditions, but unfortunately at his time, nobody could give him the science behind the idol therapy. Otherwise, I'm sure, just as he incorporated mythology, he would have possibly incorporated some form of idol therapy.
Not just mythology, sir, even the symbols, we have so much significance of symbols. And what is idol therapy? I think it is one form of symbolic form of symbols, using symbols. And
Yes, but there are two qualifications. One, the symbols have been chosen with great care for particular purpose. So if you are choosing something for Muladhar, only certain forms of symbols are chosen.
Okay, yes.
So symbols are chosen with great care for particular purposes. And second, the symbols are not just put on paper, but they are rendered in different materials. So you will have metal idols, you will have wood idols, you will have stone idols, And all of this is based upon a different purpose. Based upon the purpose, you choose the material.
Okay.
So that is second. And third, there is this aspect of the crystal as an energy container, the crystal, the idol as a crystal, and the
Okay.
idol as a vehicle for consciousness transfer. So these aspects are different from the way Jung uses symbols and mythology. These are additional aspects which are not there. But I'm sure if somebody would have told him all these things, possibly he would have incorporated them.
Sure, yes. And sir, how about holistic healing then? I'm sure idol therapy is some way or the other used there.
Because this science is so deeply lost that even in holistic healing, you don't find much use of the science. What we find in holistic healing is that a small part of holistic healing, uh, which goes into visualization, which goes into angel healing, which goes into healing with higher beings, those forms, they use this science to some extent. But they use the ready-made idols which are there in the Indian culture and which are supposed to do certain tasks. But there is no innovation. Like if a person comes to you, you don't innovate an idol specific to that person. So this innovation in idol therapy has completely gone out. We are only spending the capital of the past. So that is one part, that a very few schools in holistic healing, the angel healing, the healing with higher beings, right? The some forms of hypnotherapy, particularly the way they are practiced in India, not outside. They use uh, some form of idol therapy, but the traditional uh, energy healing practices like Reiki or pranic healing still don't use idols. Nearest to idols comes crystals. So both of them do use crystals, right? Both individually and in network configurations, but they don't take the next step of creating an idol made out of crystal material. Let us say you create Lord Ganesha out of crystal material and then energize it and put it at certain places for certain purposes. So you are combining the property of a crystal material, the strength of the form of Ganesha, and the story in the tradition, which all of us know here. And then the way we relate traditionally, even without effort, to that particular god, that particular form and idol, and bring it into the arena of healing and self-development. So that, I think even the holistic healing schools are not using it. I have seen even yoga schools, which very naturally should be using idol therapy. Even they have lost the science of it. Even they are not using idol therapy except to worship. So they are also limited to idol worship. They are not exactly to idol therapy.
Why do you think yoga schools should be doing idol therapy?
Uh, because some of the practices of yoga, like Trataka, like Dhyan, like Dharana, they can easily make use of these idols and the forms. Uh, in those 8 steps of Patanjali, there are certain steps where you can easily make use of these idols. Then you can also go deeper into those aspects of dhyana and meditation. And when we, for example, let us say, sorry. So when you go deeper into that aspect of dhyana, you can make use of the idols and idol therapy processes. And then if we use yoga for chakra purification, so one of the applications of yoga is to go step by step, what Hatha Yoga does. that you go step by step. First, you take up the lower chakra and you think what asanas will be helpful to purify that, what pranayam will be helpful to purify that. And to that, you add idol therapy that enhances the effectiveness of the whole package. Of course, this is done by deeply interested spiritual seekers. This is not done by ordinary yoga practitioners. But even at that level, we don't see really the application of idol therapy. We only hear in some forms of tantra that this is used in great details. Some schools in India and some schools in Tibet, and I am told in Sri Lanka.
Okay. So do you see idol therapy making a comeback?
I think so, and I hope so. Especially if we look at the crystal aspect of therapy, idol therapy, and the consciousness transfer part of idol therapy. And if we can create idol therapy centers where we do it in a scientific way, for example, take the confession part of idol therapy. The way idols are in India, they are such public spaces, very difficult for anyone to verbally articulate a confession. He has to make confession only in his mind. But if we can really create idol therapy centers, which our temples actually were meant to be, our temples were never meant for worship, they were meant for idol therapy. And idol self-development through idols, not only therapy, but full human development through idols. And the whole ecosystem of practices and processes that go around it. If we can create those kind of scientific centers, we can actually make use of this process for confession, for powering our drives, for feeling safer, for catharsis, for energy enhancement. And this can be done if we first create a scientific explanation of it, and then we do some empirical research and show it to the world that this can work and there is a scientific aspect to it, and then go on to create prototype centers and then go on for larger centers. But if we can do it, I think it would be a great service to the public health aspect of well-being.
So you have any plans since that?
I would love to do this development of this area conceptually and in practice. I have some ideas how to do it. If destiny will, I will get resources and direction to do it. And if that happens,
Not paying, sir.
I will do it.
Well, what better time than Ganesh Chaturthi to discuss about idol therapy and make a step forward, take a step forward rather. Thank you so much, sir, for discussing this topic with us. And for our viewers, you can write your queries and suggestions at hvindia@gmail.com. Till then, namaste.
Namaste.